Just dumb luck. This tiny little school, there happened to be a poster up. Nissan had some program where they would take engineering students to Japan and show them how it's done. It was like a little summer program. Introduce them to Japanese culture and show them around their engineering facilities and test tracks. I got in. It turned out it was the last year they ever did it.
From Inside the MotoMan Studio, these are extraordinary stories of ordinary folks and how they became the people shaping the car world, the tech world, and our future. As we've learned over now 2 seasons of this show, all of my guests are very passionate about what they do. But it took them a detour through someone investing in them. And I don't mean money, rather time, usually a parent, a teacher, someone close to them. Today's guest, you know him very well from being almost a co-host over the past couple of years on my other show. He became the Master of All Technobabble at Mazda. And yes, you will learn in this story that people did invest in him, but you will also learn that this master of more things than Technobabble was preordained for what he's doing today.
My dad was in Boston because he was going to MIT. He managed to get himself out of a tiny little nothing town in Kentucky and smarted his way straight from there to MIT. He showed me a picture once of the video game that he made in 1974, I think. It was the size of a refrigerator. It had a screen about this big. It was like asteroids. But the car stuff was kind of baked in early. Like my dad's whole side of the family was into cars. My grandfather had an E-Type in this small town in Kentucky when my dad and my mom were dating.
That's highly unusual, isn't it?
Very unusual, yeah.
How does an E-Type make its way to rural Kentucky, though? Was he in the military or something?
He was on a submarine. He was on one of the first nuclear subs that went under the
That's super cool.
The Arctic ice shelf. He was a doctor.
Oh, so you come from a line of smart people.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, and
I'm kind of the disappointment.
Yeah. So you're a grease monkey.
Right.
Yeah, a doctor, an aerospace engineer, and a grease monkey.
Right. Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to go back to Kentucky every summer. I'm not really sure how many years it was. In my memory, it was huge.
Yeah.
I might have only gone there 2 or 3 years. I don't know, but it was formative times. So my grandfather had an airstrip in his backyard. He had a little biplane.
Wait a minute. We're not going to drive past this.
It was the 70s.
You had
Everybody had airplanes.
Excuse me. I was born in the 70s. I did not have an airstrip. So your grandfather not only had a plane, but an airport.
Yeah. I mean,
a Jaguar.
It was a little grass strip.
Still?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a part of the field that you don't grow corn on.
What did he fly?
Yeah. He had a Comanche, Piper Comanche.
Very cool.
Yeah. I think there was probably a 172 in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had an air coupe. Remember what those were?
I do
the little
remember.
twin tail weird thing with no flaps. And I remember the deep disappointment I had when my dad sold the air coupe to buy an Apple II.
But that tells you how expensive an Apple II was.
Right. And it was probably a smart move.
They were $2,500
cool.
back in the early 80s.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money, man.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the first car that you remember from your grandfather?
He had a 911 forever. Forever.
Now I'm getting why you are who you are. A 911 was it? Which one?
It was a 76 Targa. So the worst 911 ever made.
Why do you say it's the worst one ever made?
Well, Targas were not the best. 76 was the worst year engine-wise.
Yeah.
First of all, from a modern standpoint of a guy in California, it's the first year that's not smog exempt, but it has thermal reactors instead of cats.
Yeah.
The engines were unreliable because the thermal reactors would overheat things, and it was a weird unicorn engine, and so it was not the best of the breed.
So what does it mean to have a grandfather that has an E-Type, a 911, a dad with a 2002? Does that mean you're wrenching on cars with them? Does that mean they're letting you drive them when you're 7 years old? What's
they
the story?
didn't do much wrenching at all. Like I picked that up, but they didn't do a whole lot of wrenching.
Oh, so no shade tree mechanic.
No,
even in Kentucky, there's shade trees.
Well, I mean, everybody does a little bit, but
yeah.
He always took it somewhere to get it worked on. When I was 10, and 10 is a dangerous time for a kid, I think.
Why?
Something gets exciting when you're 10, and I think you're stuck with that for life. Like whatever you're into when you're 10. My dad got a radio kit when he was 10, and next thing you know, he's an electrical engineer for the rest of his life, right? My dad got an RX-7 when I was 10. 12A, 1983. Manual choke still.
So you have a non-stop array of these amazing cars when you're by the time you're 10
Just
years old.
that's the baseline of normal for me.
How do you make the departure from that to the lawn darts that are 510s that you start doing all of this
Well, because
wrenching on?
Because when I could get my first car, I needed something I could afford.
Yeah.
That I could insure, and 510s were still invisible to insurance companies back then, and that could be made good, but wouldn't attract attention.
Did you know
pulled
the
over.
history with John Morton and Peter Brock with those things at that point?
A touch of it. So it was harder to know history of stuff that happened 10 years ago in the 80s than it is now. I saw some picture in Road and Track of the BRE 510. That's like pretty much all I had, and they had some book that Road and Track published of like coolest used cars to buy or whatever, and so there was a little story on there on 510s and how they were better than anybody thought they were, because they were a little bit of a forgotten thing at that point. They were in a low point when you could pick them up for $200, and then there was a once I got the car, there was a Datsun club in Seattle, the Northwest Datsun Enthusiasts, and that was back when you would go and see the people in person. In a Datsun club, you sit around a room and talk about cars. So I went to this first club meeting, and it was like, "Wow, these are my people."
Now, how old are you when you're doing this?
16. As soon as I got the thing running, I just tried to make it faster, of course. Autocrossing was an obvious, natural thing I wanted to do. I'd spent enough time hanging around at autocrosses while he was doing it. He used to autocross the RX-7. We had a 83 Subaru at the same time as the RX-7.
Okay, I'm not so excited about your dad anymore.
He autocrossed the Subaru and trophied with it once.
Really?
Yes.
Was it one of those turbo
I must have been an
coupes?
oddball class or
Do you
something.
remember the
it
turbo
was
coupe, the 83 or something
Yeah,
like that?
they had a turbo back then.
Yeah.
This was a non-turbo, front-wheel drive, one-barrel carburetor.
Were you like Mr. like Road and Track, Car and Drive?
Yeah.
So you had them all.
My dad gave me a Road and Track subscription about the same time he bought the RX-7. So he was just throwing me down that well.
Oh,
like
so
crazy.
he's an enabler.
Yeah,
so it's really his fault.
Yeah. I mean, he was into sports cars and stuff at that time pretty heavily. He still is, but not to the degree that I have fallen down that well. But
now he just can't even recognize it. Yeah, you are a complete monster, including your wife. So what happens when you get the 510?
So we totaled.
Oh, and how much did you pay for it?
$475.
In what, 1985?
This would have been. This was probably 89.
89. You paid
Yeah.
$400.
Yeah, $475.
Okay, so for the avoidance of doubt, like a Chevy back then was like 18 grand. So this
A
is
new one.
a new one.
Yeah, okay.
So that gives you an idea of
doesn't
how
even-
cheap this is.
Yeah, yeah.
$400 is nothing.
You have to go back a long way for $400 to not be nothing.
Yeah, you
But I mean,
Ts, yeah.
at 16, it was still all I had.
Yeah.
Right.
So
In fact, I think my mom pitched in to get up to the 475.
Oh.
I think actually, if I remember right, my mom offered to give me a car, but the price limit was $500.
wow,
So actually, I
big
didn't even
spender.
pay for it. She paid for it.
Big spender.
Yeah. So I went and found something that was under the cap, and it was rusted out. Like when I got it, it wasn't that far from running.
What was it, a two-door or four-door?
It was a two-door.
Two-door.
I used to have to take the tire iron and put it on the passenger's floorboard to keep the floor mat down. Because it would start flapping in the breeze on the freeway.
Wasn't that like air conditioning?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works in the
Very
summer.
moist air conditioning. in Seattle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what did you do to make that thing right?
Well, every 510 was hot rodded, so it already had an L20B in it. It and 5-speed, and it had some. It was actually like the BRE street suspensions, their Mulholland suspension. I don't know
On
what.
a $400 car?
Yeah.
Oh, you lucked out.
Every 510 was modified, and it was rusty as hell and smelled like rat piss.
Okay, that's lovely.
Yeah, no, it was Seattle. Cars leak in
Yeah.
Seattle. It's always wet. It was a gross car, but I loved it. And when I bought another 510 shortly thereafter for $200, I think I was going to swap the bot.
To replace it?
I think I was going to swap everything over into that one because it was less rusty.
Oh, it was a parts car.
Yeah. So, or the original car we scrapped because of the rust and put the engine in there. I ended up rebuilding that L20 because it would smoked like. I worked at Jiffy Lube, so I could just change the oil every week if I wanted to. That was like a perk.
Okay. Some people work in it on a burner, or you work at Jiffy Lube.
I had to change the spark plugs every week because it burned so much oil. I ran 2 heat ranges hot, and I still had to change the spark plugs every week.
And you didn't see this as a problem?
Well, that was a problem, but spark plugs were cheap, and gas was cheap, everything was cheap.
Yeah.
This had a quirk where the spark plugs wouldn't fire while the starter was cranking. So you'd have to crank it, get some momentum in the engine, let go and hope it catches. Crank it, let go and hope it catches. I'm using the wrong hand, 510 start on the left side.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I figured this out until years after I sold the car. 510s originally had a dual point distributor.
Yeah.
And so one of the points just wasn't working.
And you didn't think to fix this?
That was too advanced for my knowledge at that time.
So, okay, this is an important point. You've got road and track coming in. You finally have a car. You're wrenching on it. Are you teaching yourself? Is there someone around, like at the Jiffy Lube or somebody like your dad? Let me show you how to do this.
I'm mostly teaching myself. My dad and my stepdad both, knew how to turn wrenches to some degree, but they weren't super into it. They just, you grow up on a farm. You know
But
which
how
end
did
of a
you
wrench
teach
to
yourself?
throw.
There is no
There
Ask
are
Google.
manuals.
There's no YouTube.
No, but there's manuals. They used to put information on pieces of paper and stick them together on one end, and you could open them and read things.
What's that?
I think they called them books.
I thought that's called the Dead Sea Scrolls.
They called those things service manuals. That's what they called
Okay.
them. And there was a brilliant book, How to Hot Rod and Race Your Datsun. There was one all about how to race prep a 510, and there was another one on that Frank Hanselwitz wrote, on how to rebuild and modify those L series engines, because those were just these great Lego kits that you could piece together. The great thing was, as all this stuff was really influential to me. I got really into BRE and Peter Brock and John Morton, Frank Hanselwitz. The guy, the guy who wrote the How to Race Your 510 was actually Bob Warrer, was a pen name. I ended up meeting all these guys when I moved down to California and ended up in the magazine business.
Of course you did.
All super cool guys.
Yeah.
But it was so cool to actually meet all of the people that had basically raised me in this world vicariously through.
But does that spark an interest? Does that spark maybe I want to do this for a living? Where does that come from?
Never even crossed my mind that I could. I mean, what are the odds that you could write for a car magazine, right? There's only like 6 guys that get to do that. Yeah, I wanted to, but I never actually thought of it as a possibility.
I thought they were appointed by like the Tsar of Russia.
Right. My English teachers used to complain that my writing sounded like I was writing for a car magazine.
They would say that?
Yeah, that was actually said at one point.
I do not believe
it. Yeah, because that's all I read.
Okay, so that was your textbook.
Yeah.
I understand.
So you just write in the style that you're used to
Yeah.
reading. So when I had some assignment, it sounded like a car magazine.
So you come from a line of very smart people, a doctor and an MIT alum.
Yeah.
What about you, school-wise?
I was pretty good in school until I got to college.
Where did you go to college?
Harvey Mudd, which is a
Harvey Mudd.
obscure, tiny little engineering school that is really difficult. So as soon as I knew that I was going to go to California, I had to get a Datsun Roadster.
Of course you did.
Right?
You have to.
You need a convertible.
You need a convertible.
Right.
I totally agree.
So, and that was why it was a good thing that I got in early, because then I had like 9 months to get the car and make it work.
And why I'll make it up, why was a Fiat 124 not an option?
I was already in the Datsun club.
So you had to stay in the club.
Well, I mean, it was just the obvious. I knew all the Datsun stuff. I knew a guy who was selling one.
Yeah.
So I don't remember how much it was, but I'm pretty sure it was still 3 digits.
For a Datsun Roadster, man, try that today.
It was also extremely rusted out.
Yeah.
When you get up to speed, the front fenders would just start flapping like this. It was a pushrod 1.6 liter with dual SUs. And R16, the L series motors in the 510s were super reliable. The old R series did not have a good reputation. It was hard to find parts for them. This thing overheated all the time. And so I decided that in order to make my car more reliable, I was going to do an engine swap to an L series.
In the 1600.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't something that anybody really did at that time. There wasn't any kind of kit to make it fit. I don't know why I thought I could do this, but I figured I could. So I took the engine from my 510. I built an engine. I kind of collected parts from all the Datsun nerds around town. So I think it was like 7 different engines that went together into this. And I had this book on how to hot rod your L-Series engine. So I had, calculate the compression ratio, use this piston, use this cylinder head, use this engine block, build this weird hybrid 1.8 liter engine. Stuck it in there. I made a transmission mount adapter bracket by just taking a piece of steel and cutting it with a saber saw and bending it in a vise. The mounts were in a different place on the 2 engines. But they both, bolted up. So I just bolted a plate to the engine block and came back and it sort of lined up to the engine mount, but there was a big gap. And so I ended up JB welding a stack of washers together to get the gap right. And I literally had this thing, built with plates that I cut out on the floor and drilled with a hand drill and stacks of washers. Got the thing in there and barely got it running in time to go to school. Like, I was thrashing for the last month before I had to go down there. Ended up firing it up for the first time like 2 days before I was supposed to drive down there. It was running on 2 cylinders. I couldn't figure out why. I didn't have an exhaust yet. It was an open manifold. I just had to hop in the thing running on 2 cylinders and drive 10 miles across town to the muffler shop so they could put an exhaust in the thing. I finally figured out the distributor turned the other way than I thought it did. So 2 of the wires were in the wrong place, and I swapped those. Suddenly it ran on 4 cylinders. So, like, literally the day before I was going to have to just bail and get a plane ticket, I swapped the wires, and it ran. Like, okay, I'm driving to California in this car that I just put together.
In a convertible.
In a convertible.
And did you sell the 510 at that point?
Yeah, I think one of them sat around in my mom's
you still
yard.
Had 2.
Yeah, I had sold one of them. One of them ended up sitting around rotting for years. My mom was very patient.
Are they thinking, like, why does our 18-year-old have 3 cars? Never crossed their mind.
I think I had shown signs that was inevitable for a long time.
Okay.
It wasn't a surprise to anybody.
And what was your time at Harvey Mudd like?
Miserable.
Why?
It's really hard. School's hard. Math is hard.
Okay. But you were a good student. You come from a line of MIT and doctors.
I had been. When you're in high school, I was really smart for high school. You go to a school full of the smartest people in the country, you're not the smart guy anymore.
Competition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing they tell you when you get there is you guys were all the smartest in your school. You're not the smart one anymore. And for most of us, they were right.
They actually said the words.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, because that's the shock that everybody who gets into a smart guy school is going to have. Like, to get in there, you have to have been the smart guy up until then. And now you're surrounded by everybody else who's smarter than you.
Funny they didn't tell us that at Arizona State University. So you're there, you don't like it. Are you falling behind? What's happening?
Yeah, I fell behind. I failed a couple classes freshman
wow.
year. I had to take some makeup classes back up in Seattle over the summer. I really wanted to learn how, when you're wrenching on cars and you want to be an engineer, you want to know how all the stuff works.
Yeah.
And how did you figure this stuff out? And that's what I wanted to know. And Harvey Mudd was too theoretical for the way I think. I'm a very hands-on guy and a very sort of intuitive thinker. And they didn't get to anything that looked like an application that was interesting. I needed someone to say, this is the problem and this is how we figure out to solve it, rather than here's a bunch of math and this is how you do linear algebra, and dance around with all these different techniques that it would be really handy to know, but with no context of why you need to know them. Right?
Okay.
I'm not interested unless I know why I'm interested.
So, are you starting to get any other interest besides cars? It's like, are you dating women? What's going on at this point?
Yeah, I met my first wife in college.
Oh, hold on a minute there, Tex. You've been married before?
I have.
I did not know this about you.
Yeah.
How long were you married?
A couple of years.
Couple of years.
Yeah.
So you got married young, like your dad.
Not as young.
But you met her at Harvey Mudd.
Yeah.
So she was one of the smartest guys in the room, too.
Yeah.
So you're and was she into cars at that point?
No.
Ooh, that's why.
Yeah.
Wow,
It's never going to work out.
Yeah, so I'm finding out. You're getting through school. Do you have an idea? You want to be an engineer, but is there like a picture of, I want to work for General Motors, or I want to do...
I want to work for Nissan. I'm a Datsun nerd.
Really?
Yeah, so that just dumb luck. This tiny little school, there happened to be a poster up. Nissan had some program where they would take engineering students to Japan and show them how it's done. It was like a little summer program. introduce them to Japanese culture and show them around the their engineering facilities and test tracks and stuff. I got in. It turned out it was the last year they ever did it. So I went to Japan as the bubble was popping, basically.
So 91.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was the summer of 92. So
real estate collapse. They realize they can't control their monetary policy. The whole thing.
This was the end of it.
Yeah.
Everything was still, looked amazing on the surface. All the cool cars were there. Everything was super clean. There wasn't a homeless person in the whole country.
Yeah.
It's different now. But I got to see the very, very end of the bubble when I was there. So it was like 2.5 weeks. They put us up. They take us around to different cities and show us different things.
And you were an intern for Nissan.
No, it wasn't even an intern. It was just they took they were probably 15 or 20 engineering students, and they take us around and show us the test track and show us the factory and have us talk to some engineers.
Yeah, but at the risk of sounding like a New Yorker, what's in it for them?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how that poster ended up in Harvey Mudd with 450 students, and I just happened to walk by it and see it. I had a passion for a certain thing, which I didn't realize until much later is a kind of lucky thing. A lot of people don't have a thing that they're passionate about.
So you come back from Japan. What are you thinking?
It was the coolest place I'd ever been. I mean, it was like another planet.
Yeah.
I've been to other countries where you don't speak the language, but at least you can read the signs. And here, everything's backwards. People walk on the wrong side of the sidewalk. You can't read a sign. Did you guys travel as a family
growing up? Like, what did you do as a family growing up?
A lot of road trips.
Like where?
Lots of road trips. We did, when I still had my learner's permit, my stepdad's family was in Illinois. We were living in Seattle. And we did a 52-hour nonstop drive from Seattle to Illinois, going through Kansas City to visit somebody else. Where we folded down the back seats of the Subaru and put an air mattress back there, and we just take turns. Somebody would sleep in the back, and the other two would drive. And I was, 14 and a half, one of the drivers. So yeah,
once again, fortuitous event.
When we moved to Seattle, we drove there from Virginia via Texas.
But you're 14 and a half, and they're letting you drive on road trips.
Yeah, because obviously that was the only thing I wanted to do in life. It would be hard to stop me.
Yeah, but I would argue they did that for time efficiency.
Well, I mean, there's certainly, I'm smart. She's going to figure out what's in it for her. Yeah.
So what happens? You graduate university, where do you go?
So the economy was taking a dump at that point.
Absolutely.
None of the opportunities that were close at hand seemed interesting at all. Corporate America was looming as kind of a boring place to go get lost. One of the things I had learned on this Nissan trip, we'd also visited a Nissan engineering center in Michigan. Was
it's a hell of a trip both ways.
Oh yeah, it was all over the place. Well, one of the things I learned is that some people design seatbelts for a living. And I sure as hell didn't want to do that. And before I graduated, actually, I was reading Motor Trend, and there was a story about this guy who's trying to import GTRs. Now, when I was in Japan, I'd seen my first R32 GTR.
Of course you did.
And that is the coolest thing on the planet.
That was a spaceship.
You're already a Datsun nerd, and you see a GTR when they're brand new on the road with a 4-inch exhaust pipe on the back of it. And I start studying up on this thing. And because I'm at Nissan, I start asking about this thing. They're like, here's the SAE paper explaining the car. So I got the detailed dirt on this car that nobody knew about over here. And that became the dream car. That's what I got to have, right?
Okay.
And so I saw there was this guy that was trying to import GTRs. I'm like, I want in on this. And it turns out that his company was half a mile from Harvey Mudd. So I went over there and got myself a job.
He didn't have a choice in the matter.
No.
Yeah. So what were you doing there?
I was answering the phone a lot. This was when the Supra and the RX-7 had just come out, and he had
Mark IV.
Yeah. He had put an intake, an intercooler, and exhaust on a Supra, and was a hero. Because he was the first one to do that, and nobody knew that it was that easy. So he put a boost controller on it, turned the knob, and suddenly he's making 400 horsepower. And 400 horsepower at that time was mind-blowing.
It was.
Right?
Yeah, back then, what was it making? 7 PSI out of the turbocharger from the factory? It was really low.
Yeah, it was really low, and they had lots of headroom, and you just turn the knob and it would make a ton more. So there were guys calling... He had brought this to some magazine test for Motor Trend and got a couple of column inches in there about this car, and his phones were just ringing off the hook. This business just exploded out of nowhere. Like suddenly he's the super guy, and RX-7. He had RX-7 stuff too. So I'd spent half the day answering the phone call with excited guys who read this magazine. We're trying to decide, should I buy a Supra or should I buy an RX-7? And I would sit there and sort of talk through the differences between the two cars, neither of which I'd driven, but I could pay attention and knew what the difference between a Mazda and a Toyota was.
Back then, they were $45,000.
Yeah,
that was a lot of money.
There would be 10 phone calls a day from guys who are about to go buy one or the other one to our advice on which one they should get. And some college kid was sitting there on the phone answering those questions. Car people are my people. Some car guy calls up on the phone, and no matter where he is or where he's from, I can talk to him, and we're totally comfortable, have an intelligent conversation. Talk to me about football. Forget about it. I don't even know. So many years of awkwardly sitting around family events, like I don't give a shit about the Steelers or whoever. Right? Finally, I get to talk to my people.
I'm going to teach you something. It carries me through. Whenever you're in one of those situations where everybody's yakking about football and something goes on the TV and everybody gets excited, I scream home call.
Home call?
Yeah. Think about it. Because you have a 50% chance that you're right. If you scream home, and it works baseball, football, basketball, everything. And I'll admit, I do go to the one Dodger Mets game a year that happens in LA, but that's it.
I'm not into basketball.
So you're working at this place. Is it a full-time job or part-time?
No, it was a part-time job. I'm going to school, and then I'm coming over here, and they gave me a title, Chief Product Development Engineer, just to make it sound
While
impressive.
you were in college?
I wasn't really. They just knew it made up a fancy. They were trying to impress people too. Look, we have a real engineer student.
Of course they do.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're just trying to impress people with me, and I'm like, hey, cool, look at this title.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're like, hey, we blew up the RX-7. Can you go pull that motor and replace it? And I'm like, I've never worked on anything more complicated than a 510 before, but okay, I'll try. So that was the second car I'd worked on after an L series was straight to a 13B twin turbo.
You decided to work on the most delicate RX-7s on the planet.
My boss told me to do it. I was getting paid to do it. They had blown up the car because all it took to blow up an RX-7 at that point was intake, intercooler, and exhaust.
Oh, they were horrible, those engines.
Yeah. It was the best car ever made and simultaneously the worst car ever made.
I agree, but I still want one.
Oh, they're brilliant.
I love those.
Brilliant. I just pulled the motor out and everything. I'd take it off, put it in a baggie, label it with a number, hope I remembered where it went when I put it on the next motor, and I managed to get the thing back together and running miraculously. I'd never seen it run before because it was blown up already the first time I saw it.
Instead of a word from our sponsors, a brief interruption. As you can imagine, all of us here are incredibly excited about the return of Inside the MotoMan Studio, so much so we'd like to bring you more guests more frequently, and in the future make some of these live town hall events. So to that end, we'd like to ask you a favor. Can you help us get the word out? There are two really easy ways to do this. First and foremost, can you share the show, Inside the MotoMan Studio, on your favorite social platforms? That includes Reddit. I would argue Reddit is even more important than the usual suspects. And then second, this is now a podcast. So go to your favorite podcast directory and subscribe, rate, and review Inside the MotoMan Studio. However you choose to help us, we'd be greatly appreciative. And now, back to this incredible story. So what happens now? You got this part-time job. You've been to Japan. You've been to Detroit with Nissan. You're graduating Harvey Mudd.
Honestly, I just took the laziest path. Like I didn't see anything interesting in the recruiting stuff that was happening at school.
Okay.
And I already had this job doing fun stuff. And I kind of, I'd come down to Southern California to get into the hot rod scene, and here I was in it. So I'm just going to do this job full time now.
And you had
it's not the smartest move coming out of a fancy college to go work on this.
Yeah, especially because how much did you pay for that school? Because those schools aren't cheap.
Yeah, well, I'm, again, incredibly lucky. My dad saved up lots of money and paid for the school. That is so much bigger gift than I appreciated at the time.
most people don't understand how important that is.
Yeah.
Changes the trajectory of your life.
Huge.
Like, you come out of school, like most kids today are coming out of school with $100,000, $200,000 in debt.
Yeah.
You're not getting out until you're 40.
You're not gonna take the easy path and go work down at the race shop.
No, you're not. So you went to I would argue Harvey Mudd was $15,000 a year at that point.
Probably 25.
Okay, $25,000 a year.
Yeah.
So here's a guy that's paying the freight for $100,000 in the early '90s.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money, man.
Yeah.
So that's a huge, again, another fortuitous event in your life.
Very.
So did they look at you like, I just paid $100,000. You are not going to work at some grease monkey shop?
I'm sure that thought was in their heads, but they were nice enough to not say it to me. Through that, I ended up meeting a bunch of other people in the industry, which was kind of the idea why I wanted to do that. I wanted to kind of get into the aftermarket. Because the aftermarket seems like a lot more. The aftermarket was booming at the time, first of all, and it seemed like a lot more fun than working for some stuffy OE, right? Designing seat belts. I knew how to do lots of weird, random, different things. So I designed some parts. We made intakes, which is it's just a tube. You stick the throttle body on one end and an air filter on the other. And so designing the intake is like, let's make a bracket to stick here to hold the thing off of the engine bay. It wasn't that sophisticated. When I was doing that, I could take pictures and do layout software and stuff. I made the magazine ads. I wrote the catalog. I wrote the accounting software at one point. And because I was making the magazine ads, I met the guys at Turbo Magazine, met the guys at Sport Compact Car, and I was getting sick of working at the shop I was working at. And the magazine guys looked like they were having a lot of fun. And I had a bit of a writing bug. I felt like I had something to say. So I would just start. I just wrote a couple of stories about stuff, about 5/10s, really. They didn't end up buying the story, but they ended up giving me a job instead.
Are they looking at you like, why is an engineer talking to us about this?
No, they're like, oh, cool, engineering editor. We can call them that instead of tech editor because that sounds fancy. So again, people give me cool titles because it makes them look good.
But they're valuing this skill, which
the fact
that
I knew what I was talking about. I mean, because I also I would talk to them and say, hey, you got these 17 things wrong in this article about this Datsun. But you get to drive a different car every day. You get to go out to the track, and you get to go on these photo shoots and go drift this car around for the camera a bunch of times, burn up other people's tires. You're hanging out with lots of fun-loving people that love what they do, and it's a good crew. And we took this magazine that was Sport Compact Car was the car spin-off of Truckin' Magazine. It was the car spin-off of Mini Truckin' Magazine, which was a spin-off of Truckin' Magazine. It was the redheaded stepchild of that publishing company because Truckin' Magazine was king.
Yeah, they're paying the freight.
And we were just these doofuses over there.
Tuner idiots.
Right. And we turned it into something that was informative and passionate and articulate and didn't have girls in it. It was not about...
So you were doing it classy.
It was not about the scene. It was about cars.
Okay, so now what happens after the magazine?
So the internet was starting to happen.
Starting to be a thing.
The industry was kind of starting to sink. The page count was going down. We're losing subscribers. And as the internet's coming on, our publishing company didn't know what the hell to do with it. But it definitely seems like the best thing that they should do is make us work more and not give us any more money. So the writing was kind of on the wall that maybe this wasn't going to be the same thing it had been. I liked the fact that with a monthly schedule, you can do stuff, think about it, process it, make it into a coherent thought, write it, and send it out.
As opposed to the internet, which is nothing but
the internet stream of consciousness. It's in your ears, out your fingers, and you don't have any time to think about anything.
Did you guys have an internet presence at that point at all?
No.
So nothing.
No
website.
But it was obvious that was going to be happening.
Yeah.
And I didn't want any part of it. I still kind of wanted to work at a car company, and I had always, when I was reviewing cars, I was reviewing them in much more detail than was necessary for our readers.
Something I know nothing about.
I was trying to tell the manufacturers what the hell they were doing wrong, ultimately. And
so it was a love letter in each one of your reviews.
Yeah. As the writing was slowly appearing on the wall over a couple of years, I started trying to really write better than I needed to, realizing that this was my resume that I was writing, right? And it worked, turns out. So I knew people at a bunch of the manufacturers. As a Datsun nerd, Nissan was the obvious place I wanted to go, but I knew a bunch of guys that worked there, and it was not the place I wanted to go anymore.
Different culture, yeah.
A totally different culture. There were 3 or 4 enthusiasts left at the company, and they were incredibly frustrated. Meanwhile, over at Mazda, they weren't making that many cool cars at that moment, but they were all passionate car people over there that really wanted to make cool cars. And I had been fighting this nonstop battle at the magazine against the publishing company. We want to make a really good quality product, and they just wanted us to sell out, write whatever the advertisers wanted us to sell.
Yeah.
And so I was getting tired of fighting the same battle over and over again. We'd win, we'd make a great product. The advertisers would be beating down their doors to be on in our book, even though we were honestly reviewing their products, and sometimes would say they were crap.
Yeah.
And they still wouldn't get the picture that making a good quality product mattered.
Yeah.
And I saw the guys at Nissan were having the same kind of battles with their bosses. And it was pretty clear at Mazda that there would not be any battle. All the way to the top of the company were car guys. We had VPs that were going to the track every weekend.
Okay.
Right. So the basic idea that we should build a car that's good and fun to drive was not going to be the battle. The battle would be how to do it. Right. So that was really important. So I just went and started talking to the guys I knew there. It's like, hey, I'm thinking of jumping ship. Is there any opportunity there? And Kelvin Hiriichi, who I still work for now, is like, yeah, I think we can come up with something. And they actually made a job description up for me. We had a thing called the Product Excellence Team at that point. They had one in Japan, and we had one in North America. And I got hired into the Product Excellence Team. And we were just sort of overseeing, trying to find what the weak points were and what we needed to do to make the cars better. It was a very sort of broad, vague.
What were the dominant cars back then for Mazda?
The first prototype that I got to drive, Mazda Speed 6.
That's not a bad start.
That was a pretty good first trip. The car was baked at that point.
Yeah,
it was done. But as the first test trip, that was pretty good.
So let's pause here. Let's talk about something important here. What does it actually mean to be the Master of Technobabble, or whatever the hell your title is at Mazda? What do you actually do?
Try to nudge the guys who do the real work into making the car come out the right way. And however it is that we need to do that. We're trying to tell them way up front when they're planning the car what it should be and set some targets for them. We try to catch the prototypes as they're getting developed and drive them and say, no, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right, do more of that, do less of this. We try to catch them right before they go into production and tweak the last little things we can.
You would do the tweaks.
Sometimes, or I'll talk to the guy that did the original thing and tell him what it needs to do, and he'll figure out how to do the tweaks. So all of those years that I wasn't being an engineer, I wasn't learning a lot of the basic engineering skills to actually do this stuff.
I understand.
But what I was doing was getting a lot of seat time and experience out in the real world of how the different cars work and what's important to make a car drive. So it's a very weird, different skill set that I have, and it's very, very fortunate that I've found a little niche where they want to listen to me.
And are you thinking at this point, okay, my career's going well, I'm now in a car manufacturer, are you happy you made the switch, or?
Yeah, it was a shock.
How so?
Going from the responsibility you have when you're making your own stuff, as you know, the end product is you. You're responsible for every bit of it. Even if you might be in a magazine that's got a certain amount of infrastructure, but at the end of the day, you're putting all the words together. You're saying what you're saying, and you're putting your name on it.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And you're doing it every single month, which seemed very frequent at the time. Now it's every single minute.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, trust me, I know.
Yeah, you know this very well. And to suddenly get into a big company. It's not just a small company, but it's a big company compared to a magazine.
Yeah.
Where you can just be a cog in the machine.
That works.
it was kind of a relief for a while, because I was kind of burned out. But it was also, I didn't quite know what to do with myself. The pace was very different. There's this sort
Meaning
of
faster.
Slower.
Oh, slower.
Much slower.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you're dealing on multi-year long projects.
Oh, and you have to deal with governments and
Yeah, I mean the vehicle development takes a long time. Magazine article. Hey, we need the story tomorrow. Turn it out.
Bang out your 500 words. You're done.
That's not happening at Mazda. So and as a new guy, you don't have a lot of responsibility at first.
When do you start getting to racing?
So yeah, I'd autocrossed when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I had got to do lots of track driving. The magazine, we'd go do tests, and we'd just rent out streets of Willow and have it to ourselves all day.
Because you can.
Because you can.
Yeah.
I started rallying when I was there. I had the RX-7 at that point. I had the 510 and I had the Roadster. So only. Oh, and I had an SER. I had a B13 SER. Or maybe I had a lot of cars.
So yeah, you had a lot of cars.
I don't remember exactly how they all overlapped.
For a 22-year-old, you had a hell of a lot of cars.
I still have a lot of cars for a 22-year-old.
You have even more cars now. There's no doubt about that. Yeah,
but
you
anyway,
have a place to put them now.
I made this handbrake, and I quickly discovered the first time I pulled it that when you pull the handbrake, the car turns sideways now. Whereas when you're doing it with your hands and feet, with weight transfer and steering, it turns sideways in a little bit. So I had naturally started my corner entry way early and started setting up the car, and I just pulled the handle and just turned into a cliff, climbed the cliff, and almost rolled. Like I get up on two wheels and I had to steer it down toward a cliff.
Holy crap!
Put it down, and that's when I decided I needed a roll cage. And that was a slippery slope from there. Put a roll cage in the thing, and now I've got a rally car. Well, let's still go do a rally. We survived the first rally. We didn't do well, and the hook was set at that point.
And so what happens at that point? So you fast forward, you're going to work at Mazda. You still have the 510s? You still do this?
I raced the 510 for a couple of years. Then I got a B15 Sentra SER that I got from Nissan. It was a retired press car that they would have to scrap eventually, but they were in no rush. So I got them to give me the car to turn it into a rally car. And then when I started working at Mazda, I'm like, well, I can't keep this car that belongs to Nissan that has a distributor license plate on it. You have to have a license plate on a rally car, so they just let me keep the distributor plate for a while. So at that point, I'm like, I got to give this car back to them.
That's unusual. Did you ever veer off into a daily at this point? Like, did you get your own 911? Did you buy a Corvette?
No, I didn't have. One of the things I learned driving a bunch of different cars is that expensive cars aren't that much better. A good driving car is a good driving car. It's not worth the money to have a fancy expensive car.
So I'm not going to wake up one day and see you driving an Aston Martin.
Probably not, unless it's old and depreciated. At the Evo,
it's actually the new ones are the ones that depreciate really bad.
The Evo is what convinced me that you don't need to spend the money. Like the Evo was the best driving car there was at that time. And there were.
Whoa, which one was this? What year?
There was a 7. 7 was the first one in the U.S. So I got to drive WRXs and Evos years before they came to the U.S. And I was totally hooked by those things. The first WRX I drove was 97 STI RA, the stripped out, high power, short gears, rear torque split, no nonsense, full on rally car out of the factory. That thing was just unbelievable.
When I first met you, what did you have sitting in all the cars that were in the yard?
So, all right, I still had my 510 rally car. I kept that up until last year. I have 3 NA Miatas in my backyard. I still have that Silvia, the S13 Silvia, which is in pieces and rusting into the ground, and it's really depressing. Because it's rusting to the point where I'm just never going back together. There was when a windshield was replaced at one point, they didn't seal something right, and as it's been sitting out there in the rain, the A-pillar has just got this cancer that you don't see on cars in Southern California. It's bizarre, and there's no coming back from that. So that car's dead.
Okay.
But it's still in my backyard, and I won't get rid of it because I'm a sentimental idiot.
Even though you're an old grumpy man.
I'm a 22-year-old old grumpy man.
Yeah.
I have my fancy car, which is a 987 Cayman S.
Yes.
My
I
wife's
like that a lot.
My wife's fancy car, which is a Z4M Coupe, because
Hit the lottery on that one.
she is a badass.
She is a badass.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch gears now. Let's talk about this badass.
Yeah.
So first time around, didn't do so well in the marriage department.
Yeah, right.
Second time around, man, you hit the lottery.
I did, and it took me a little while to figure that out. My
Okay, why did you take it?
a buddy of mine was trying to hook the two of us up, and
Wait, before you met, someone was trying to connect you?
yeah.
Okay, I didn't know this part of the story.
And he did a bad job of introducing.
Okay.
Where he introduced me to two girls at once, and I was mixed up about which one was which.
Like in front of each other.
Yeah, they were both right there.
Real
like
brain
this
surgeon.
is her.
Yeah.
And
Did he go to Harvey Mudd? Was he good at women?
It's probably my mistake for misunderstanding who was who. Anyway, I talked to the other girl a little bit. I wasn't that into it. Sara was smart enough not to be that interested in me, and so
Yes.
we both went off and dated other people for a couple of years.
A couple of years?
She lived in the Bay Area. I lived in Southern California, and get this. For a couple of years, she dated a guy in Southern California, and I dated a girl in the Bay Area, and we drove past each other for 2 years.
So she's obviously was not smitten. No love at first sight.
No,
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, would you? I mean, not really, but
Well,
we
had a lovely day together,
right?
but no,
Yeah,
it was
obviously
too much
not.
for me. Yeah, it was a bit too much.
You can imagine no one's gonna just fall in love with me at first sight.
So what the hell changed?
We both became available again, and the same guy tried again and did a better job.
What do you say?
Of like, no, seriously, you two this time.
He said, "I know you
Like, this
met
is
each
the
other.
one."
I know.
Yeah.
But really, you both like cars. You both like to race. You should talk to each other."
Yeah.
That was the sales pitch.
Yeah.
And she went out with you again.
Mike Kojima is a matchmaker. Yeah. It was actually at the SEMA show.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at here.
Yeah. So she'd come to the SEMA show because.
See, what the audience doesn't know is you have married a car guy. She just happens to be a girl. She's really into cars.
She's really into cars.
And can shoe.
She's a good driver.
Yeah,
Yes.
and she's attractive.
Yes, all of these things.
And I hate you. Just want to get that really clear.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
she is amazing.
How did Sara become Sara?
Her dad was into cars. Totally different cars.
Did he have 911s and
not into driving them
airstrip
fast.
and
No, he's got a
planes?
1930 Packard.
Oh, so he's into old pre-war stuff.
He's into brass cars.
Like
Yeah.
30 is not brass, but did he have like a Dietrich body Packard or something like
Oh man, no, I don't.
You gotta find out.
quite
I
get
know
it.
it's not.
Yeah.
I believe me.
It's not
an
my thing.
R32.
I can
get
look
it.
at it and I can appreciate it, and
Yeah.
I love how like cool old
Yeah.
engineering stuff is neat, but I'm
But
not
you
into
want a
those
B13
things enough.
SCR.
But yeah, and he always had cool cars, and he had Z's and Supras and stuff when she was growing up.
So she was really into it from dad.
Yeah. She had a B13 SER and was a total nerd about it. I had a B13 SER and we're a total nerd about it. We just talk about car
And you
stuff
guys
like
didn't
car
marry
dorks.
each other immediately when you found that out.
It took her a long
Okay.
time to accept that I was an acceptable
Okay,
fallback.
I
position.
love you, but B13 SERs do nothing for me. Yeah, I'm with you on the 510s, but it is a bridge too far. B13 SERs. The money you could put in that, you get a real car, man. And so you have found out.
Yeah. The B13 SER was a modern 510 at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like super cool, and I really wanted one when they came out.
Super cool. No.
Those were really cool cars
Too much
at
on
the
that
time.
car. Now, some of my audience knows this because I've shared the story in a couple of episodes, but you need to share. Where did you marry this woman?
On the corkscrew at Laguna Seca.
So, for the avoidance of doubt, not at the paddock,
No.
not at some banquet hall.
No.
You walked your now wife down a makeshift aisle on the racetrack.
On the slope. We were all standing at a very steep angle when we were doing this.
And you drove your wife to this spot on the track in what?
She drove herself.
Yeah.
I was standing there, and they let her on at turn 5, and she drove up in her M Coupe. And
to her own nuptials.
Yeah. And Jay Lamb, who runs 24 Hours of
Yeah.
Lemons, officiated the wedding.
What is this, like Universal Life Ministry or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And it's like
it can happen.
When we were planning the wedding, we like tried out all kinds of other normalish ideas, and just nothing was really clicking.
That's the only. I mean, you work for Mazda.
Yeah.
You're a car guy. You guys do track days together. This was the only option.
Well, yeah, but we had like tried other ideas just to make sure it really was the right option, and yeah, it was the right option.
Yeah, the only thing wrong with it is I didn't get invited. Let's go back to Mazda for a minute. I can put aside the fairy tale that is your wife.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges you face inside Mazda?
Well, of course, we all just want to build V8 Miatas, right? But we have to be
realistic.
No, you
don't. You do not.
No, you're actually right. I don't.
That is not you.
That is a bad example I just gave.
This is a great time to tell people what you're building.
Most people already know I'm building a Miata Busa. And that I have been building a Miata Busa for probably 7 or 8 years.
What is a Miata Busa?
It's taken a long time. Well, it's a Miata.
Yes.
And a Busa, the Suzuki Hayabusa. So there's a 1.3 liter, 11,000 RPM, 190 horsepower engine from a death motorcycle.
Yes.
Stuffed into the front of a Miata where you can control it safely.
15 years at Mazda now? 15?
Just about.
How many Miatas have you worked on?
I worked on the NC a little bit. Mostly, that was another one that was sort of baked by the time I got there. And NC1 was kind of a soft, floppy mess. And so we made a lot of stink about how we needed to stiffen the car up. And we made lots of proposals about how to do it and got our point across, and then Japan did it in a completely different way, which ultimately was better than the way we were doing it because they know what they're doing. And so the NC2 came out a lot stiffer and more fun to drive and more direct.
Let's get up to more of a macro level. And it's abundantly clear you've had some very fortuitous events that happened in your life that even got to the point of the woman you are married to.
Yeah. One of the most fortuitous.
Okay. Now you're jumping ahead of me.
All right.
What are 3 things? Could be the attributes, could be people, could be situations, whatever. What are 3 things that led to the success of Dave Coleman?
Is Dave Coleman successful?
Do you really need me to tell you this? Okay, let's think about what you do for a living. You already told me a couple of minutes ago that if you're not motivated by something you just don't show any interest. You just don't do it.
Right, yeah.
So we have found through the telling of your story.
I've managed to stubbornly do what I want to do because I can't figure out how to do anything else.
Man, you got Nissan to give you an not even an internship, just, hey, come and see our cool factory.
Yeah.
You literally got the golden ticket.
That was really cool.
I'm going to start calling you Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. So you've had this, I would say it's more than fortuitous events because I believe you make some of your own luck, and you've made your own luck, especially Nissan's a great example, or the fact that you had a B13 SCR and you met a woman with a B13 SCR, the fact that your grandfather had E-types and airports.
Yeah, well, that was either very fortuitous or not. I mean, it's what made me passionate about this ridiculous thing that I'm passionate about.
But what are three things you would point to that led to the success that you have? Because you literally get up in the morning and you do what you want to be doing since you were 14 and a half years old when you first got that learner's permit.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't break things down that way very very often. But
you're an engineer. You're analytical.
People are always trying to tell me what I am because I'm an engineer. They're always wrong. Okay. I'm a grease monkey who got an engineering degree.
You are no. If you look at the Miata Busa, you're more than a grease monkey. You are engineering a solution.
I'm also partnered up with some guys who are an actual engineer who's much more talented than I am.
Well, from what I'm seeing, there was a know-how and understanding that you brought to the table.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So stop being modest. 3 things that led to the success of Dave Coleman.
I am brutally honest about everything.
Couldn't tell.
And that's probably not always the best idea, but you can certainly sleep at night.
I like that.
That way.
Okay.
And it has worked for me in that people know they can trust my opinion, and when I say something, I'm not BSing them.
Yeah.
And that has sort of worked in various parts of it. When we were doing the magazine, we wrote reviews of stuff, and when it was bad, we said it was bad, and it pissed off my employer, but it made a better magazine and made a lot of fans. And
I totally agree.
Made the whole thing work.
Yeah.
So guys who would just do what they were told might have been more successful in that job, but it's not how I am. So that's how I did it. And a lot of guys at Mazda will trust my opinion because I'm fair and honest about it, and I'll if I'm wrong, I'll come back and say I was wrong.
Yeah.
So trying to be honest, not only with other people but also with yourself. Make it if it turns out that what I thought was right is wrong, come back to those same guys and say, hey, I think I was wrong.
Okay.
And a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that. Like, oh, but you said
being
this.
Honest.
Yeah, but you said this before. Like, you have to make sure that you were always right. No.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm wrong. Yeah.
Where do you think you picked that up along the way?
My parents. Yeah.
So that's attribute number 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more thing. Led to the success of Dave Coleman.
Good reactions. Driving.
I have never gotten that answer before. Now that is a good answer. I'm not even going to question on that. That's an incredibly good answer. Okay.
I've got fast hands when the car gets sideways.
So where do we go from here? Where does Dave go in 5 to 10 years?
Stalin made a 5-year plan. Dave Coleman does not make 5-year plans.
He just kind of finds fortuitous events.
I know what I'm into. I get slowly. I slowly resolve writing on walls when it's there. Slowly. I've been at Mazda for a long time. I was at the magazine for a long time. I don't make radical life changes. I don't have a plan for where. If I had a plan for where to go as a kid, would I be where I am now? Who makes a plan for this ridiculous set of life events?
Busy moto.
Okay.
No exaggeration.
Yeah.
But he's also a moron that gets 800 horsepower out of a normally aspirated Waggle van. Okay. So you look normal in comparison to him. Yeah. But that's the only other guy I know.
Right.
So this is an incredible story. I knew you would be too modest. I knew this about you.
Yeah.
But this is an incredible story, and I am incredibly thankful that you have shared this story with me. Now, you're going to have to come back on the show, and we're going to have to do a deep dive on that Miata Busa.
Oh, totally. As soon as I get it patched back together, we're going to bring it to the hangar. We're going to make a lot of noise.
We're going to make and you know what?
That's a great place to make noise.
We can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you certainly are not going to be the loudest one there.
No.
We just actually, you know what? We cannot take it to the west end of the runway because we will get into noise abatement problems.
Really?
Yes, it would be too loud. There are mics there, and if they catch you, they pull your ass in.
Really?
Oh yeah, and the FAA pulls you. You got to go to Fullerton and see what the hell's going on.
Wow.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right,
sir.
Good talking.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for making me feel better about myself.
Many thanks for joining us throughout the entirety of this episode, and don't forget, subscribe, rate, and review Inside the MotoMan Studio on your favorite podcast directory. And while you're sharing, how about on your socials as well as on Reddit? Until our next incredible guest, be später.